The child nobody wanted. Have you ever lived in a house where everyone acted like you were invisible? Not because you were quiet, not because you caused trouble, but because the people who were supposed to love you had already decided you didn't matter. For 15 years, that was my life. If I earned an A, my parents barely looked up from their phones. If my older brother forgot his homework, my mom rushed it to school like the world was ending. If my younger sister wanted a new phone, my dad bought it the same day. When I needed new shoes because mine had holes in the soles, I was told to make them last. Back then, I thought every family worked this way. I believed love had to be earned. I believed maybe I just hadn't worked hard enough. I was wrong. My name is Ethan. I'm 26 now. Looking back, I realized something terrifying. They didn't accidentally neglect me. They planned it. And I never would have discovered the truth. If my 82-year-old grandmother hadn't risked everything to send me one tiny message that changed my life forever, a message that looked meaningless to everyone else. 3 numbers. 2 words. 1 desperate plea. At the time, I had no idea it was a distress code. Growing up, I wasn't abused in the way movies usually show. No bruises. No screaming every day. No broken furniture. Instead, I experienced something much harder to explain. Selective love. Imagine watching your siblings receive birthday parties with dozens of friends while your birthday was forgotten until dinner. Imagine Christmas morning where everyone opened piles of gifts and you unwrapped a pair of socks because, according to your parents, you were old enough to understand. Imagine overhearing your father say, "Don't waste money on Ethan. He's not going anywhere." I heard those exact words when I was 12. They never knew I was standing behind the kitchen door. I stayed there for almost 10 minutes. Frozen. Hoping. Praying. That maybe I'd misunderstood. But I hadn't. My mother laughed. Actually laughed. Then she said something I'd never forget. "He's the practical one. He doesn't need much." Funny how people justify neglect with compliments. "You're mature. You're responsible. You're independent." Those words usually mean, "We've decided you don't deserve the same effort." School became my escape. Not because I loved homework. How could Grandpa have known? He had died nearly 12 years ago. Before I could read another line, I heard my father's voice. "Ethan!" I quickly stuffed the note and key into my pocket. "What are you doing up there?" I forced a smile. "Checking the birdhouse." He frowned. "For what?" I shrugged. "I don't know birds?" He stared at me for a moment longer than felt comfortable. Then he smiled. "Breakfast is ready." As he walked back toward the house, I noticed something strange. He glanced at the birdhouse. Not casually. Carefully. Like he was making a mental note. He knew it mattered. He just didn't know why. Not yet. Back inside, breakfast was painfully awkward. Mom kept trying to fill the silence. Dad barely looked at anyone. Grandma quietly sipped her tea. Then, without warning, she dropped her spoon. It clattered loudly against the plate. Everyone looked up. "I'm tired," she said softly. "I think Ethan should help me clean the attic later," Dad answered before I could. "There's no reason for that. I'll do it." Grandma shook her head. "No." One simple word. But there was steel behind it. I asked Ethan. For the first time in my life, I watched my father lose a silent battle. He forced a smile. "Whatever you want, Mom." But his eyes said something entirely different. An hour later, Grandma and I slowly climbed the attic stairs. The moment she closed the door behind us, her shoulders relaxed. "They can't hear us up here," she whispered. She pointed toward an old wooden trunk. "Open it." Inside were blankets, Christmas decorations, old photo albums. Nothing unusual. Until I lifted the false bottom. There it was. A small iron lockbox, no larger than a shoebox. Its keyhole matched the brass key in my pocket perfectly. I looked at Grandma. He nodded. "Go ahead." The key slid in smoothly, with a soft click. The lock opened. Inside was a thick stack of sealed envelopes. A leather journal, several faded photographs, and one manila folder labeled in Grandpa's handwriting. "For Ethan only." I swallowed hard. "Grandma." She reached over and gently touched the folder. "I promised your grandfather I'd never open it." "You've never read it?" She shook her head. "It was never meant for me." I carefully broke the seal. The first page wasn't a letter. It was a birth certificate. Mine. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then I noticed something. The date it had been issued was 6 months after I was born. Why would someone wait half a year? Then I noticed another document underneath. A hospital discharge summary. Except the mother's name had been blacked out. Not crossed out. Professionally redacted. As if someone had intentionally hidden it. My heartbeat quickened. "What is this?" Grandma looked away. "Keep reading." The next page nearly slipped from my hands. It was a notarized affidavit signed by Grandpa. The first sentence read, "If anything happens to me before Ethan learns the truth, these documents must be given to him and him alone." My mouth went dry. The truth? What truth? I turned the page. And that's when I heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps. Coming up the attic stairs. Dad. He was coming. Fast. Grandma's face went pale. "Hide everything," she whispered. I shoved the papers back into the folder just as the doorknob began to turn. It wouldn't open. Grandma had locked it. A loud knock shook the door. "Ethan!" Dad's voice was calm. Too calm. "What are you two doing up there?" Neither of us answered. Another knock. Harder this time. "Ethan, I know you're in there." Grandma leaned close enough that only I could hear. "No matter what happens, don't let him read those papers." Then, for the first time in my entire life, I heard my father shout, "Open the door!" The force of his fist rattled the old wooden frame. And in that terrifying moment, I finally understood something I'd never believed possible. My parents weren't afraid of losing Grandma. They were afraid of losing the secret she'd protected for 15 years. And somehow, that secret had always been about me. Because teachers noticed me. They remembered my name. They asked how my weekend was. One teacher even packed an extra sandwich every Friday because she figured out I skipped lunch more often than I admitted. At home, nobody noticed if I ate. But Mrs. Thompson did. That realization hurt more than hunger ever could. There was only one person who treated me like I belonged. Grandma Rose. She lived 40 minutes away in a small white farmhouse surrounded by maple trees. Every second Saturday, she'd call. "Can Ethan come visit?" My parents never wanted to drive me there. They always complained about gas money. Funny. Gas wasn't a problem when my brother had baseball practice, or when my sister wanted to go shopping. Eventually, Grandma started paying for the fuel herself. Only then did my parents agree. As a kid, I thought they were just busy. As an adult, I know they simply didn't care. Grandma's house smelled like cinnamon, old books, and fresh coffee. The moment I walked through the door, I could breathe. She always hugged me tighter than anyone else ever had. Not the polite kind of hug. The kind that silently says, "I know you're hurting." She never asked directly. She didn't have to. She could see it in my face. One afternoon when I was 13, she looked at me while kneading bread dough. "Ethan." "Yes?" "If people only appreciate you when you're useful, they don't actually love you." I laughed awkwardly. "I don't know what you mean." She smiled sadly. "I know. But someday you will." Grandma had strange habits. She wrote everything by hand. Every birthday card. Every grocery list. Every recipe. She hated texting. She still used a flip phone long after everyone else switched to smartphones. She also loved crossword puzzles. Every visit ended the same way. She'd hand me one puzzle clipped from the newspaper. "Train your brain," she'd say. I thought it was just her hobby. Years later, I had discovered those puzzles were teaching me something else entirely. By high school, the favoritism became impossible to ignore. My brother crashed Dad's truck. Dad bought another one. I accidentally broke a $10 lamp. I spent 3 months mowing lawns to repay it. My sister failed 2 classes. Mom blamed the teachers. I earned straight A's. Dad shrugged. Grades don't matter in the real world. Nothing I did counted. Nothing. The summer I turned 16, I got my first job washing dishes at a diner. Minimum wage. Long hours. Greasy floors. I loved every minute. Because for the first time, someone paid me because my work mattered. I bought my own backpack, my own clothes, my own school supplies. When I came home carrying shopping bags, Mom smiled. Not proudly, relieved. Good, she said. One less expense. That sentence changed something inside me. Children shouldn't make their parents' lives easier. Parents are supposed to make their children's lives possible. Around that time, Grandma started asking unusual questions. Do your parents still keep all the financial paperwork locked upstairs? How did she know that? Has your father ever talked about the old property? What property? She quickly changed the subject. Oh, never mind. Every visit became stranger. She'd start saying something, then stop. Like she wanted to tell me a secret, but couldn't. One rainy Saturday, while helping her organize boxes in the attic, I found an old family photo. Dad? Mom? Grandma? Me? Only something was missing. Or rather, someone. There was an empty space beside Grandma. The picture had clearly been cut. Neatly. Carefully. Someone had removed another person from the photograph. Who's missing? I asked. Grandma's hands froze. For nearly 20 seconds. She didn't answer. Finally, she took the picture away. Some stories are dangerous before the right time. I laughed. What does that even mean? She looked directly into my eyes. It means one day you'll understand why certain people wanted history rewritten. A chill ran through me. Before I could ask another question, my phone rang. Mom? Where are you? At Grandma's. You've been there long enough. Your brother needs help moving furniture. Not me. Not we miss you. I was being summoned because someone else needed free labor. Grandma heard every word. She quietly looked out the window, then whispered, "One day, you won't have to go back." I didn't understand what she meant. Because where else could I go? I had no savings. No relatives besides her. No college fund. No safety net. Just a part-time job. And a family that treated me like unpaid staff. Still, Grandma kept giving me crossword puzzles. Each one harder than the last. Some had words circled. Some had numbers scribbled in the margins. I assumed she was absent-minded. Now I know. Nothing Grandma ever wrote was accidental. The years passed. I moved out at 19 with exactly $842 in my checking account. Everything I owned fit inside an old pickup truck. Not one family member helped me pack. Mom hugged my sister because she'd miss having everyone together. She didn't hug me. Dad shook my hand like I was leaving a job. Good luck. That was it. No, I love you. No advice. No emotion. Just good luck. Oddly enough, leaving wasn't the hardest part. Realizing nobody cared that I left was. I built a quiet life, worked 2 jobs, finished community college at night, eventually landed a decent position in IT. Nothing glamorous. Just enough to pay rent and sleep without worrying about bills. My parents almost never called. Unless they needed something. Computer problems. Money. Furniture moved. Airport rides. I always said yes. Because some part of me still believed if I kept helping, eventually they'd love me. They never did. Grandma, however, never missed a birthday. Never forgot Christmas. Never forgot to tell me, "I'm proud of you." 3 words. That's all. Yet somehow, they healed wounds my parents kept reopening. Then, everything changed. One Tuesday afternoon, while I was sitting at work answering emails, my phone buzzed. A text. From Grandma? That alone was strange. She hated texting. The message was only 5 words. Bluebird. 17. Help me. At first, I thought she'd pressed random buttons. I almost ignored it. Then I remembered something. Every crossword she'd ever given me. Every strange number. Every unfinished sentence. Every warning. Suddenly, they all came rushing back. And for the first time in my life, I realized Grandma wasn't confused. She was trying to tell me something. Something she couldn't say out loud. Something so dangerous. She had hidden it in plain sight. I grabbed my keys, left work without another word, and drove toward her farmhouse. I had no idea. By the end of that day, Everything I believed about my family was going to fall apart. Bluebird 17. The drive to my grandmother's farmhouse should have taken 45 minutes. I made it in 28. I don't remember half the trip. I just remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, while the words from her text kept repeating in my head. Bluebird 17. Help me. Grandma hated texting. In 26 years, she'd sent me exactly 3 messages. Happy birthday! Drive safe! And now this. 5 words that made no sense. But something deep inside me knew they weren't random. Grandma never did anything randomly. Rain pounded against my windshield as I turned onto the gravel road leading to her farmhouse. Normally, I would see her standing on the front porch before I even parked. She always heard my truck coming. She'd wave with one hand while drying the other on her old blue apron. Not today. The porch was empty. The lights were off. The curtains were closed. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I parked and hurried to the front door. It was unlocked. That alone made my pulse quicken. Grandma locked every door, even during the day, especially after Grandpa passed away. Small towns aren't as safe as people think, she'd always say. Bad people don't announce themselves. I stepped inside. Grandma? Silence. The house smelled different. Not like cinnamon and fresh bread. It smelled cold, untouched, as if nobody had cooked in days. Grandma? Still nothing. Then I heard it. A faint cough. Upstairs. I ran. She was sitting in her bedroom by the window, wrapped in a gray blanket. She looked smaller than I remembered. Fragile. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked toward the door. The moment our eyes met, she smiled. You came. I knelt beside her. Of course I came. What happened? Are you okay? Instead of answering, she looked toward the hallway, then toward the closed bedroom door. Finally, she whispered. They're listening. A chill raced down my spine. Who? She shook her head. No names. I frowned. Grandma, you're scaring me. She reached for my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Good. You need to be scared. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Only the ticking clock filled the room. Then she quietly asked, Did anyone see you come here? I don't think so. Good. She slowly reached beneath the blanket and pulled out a folded crossword puzzle. I almost laughed. Even now? Another crossword? She placed it in my hands. This one matters. I unfolded it. Most of the puzzle had already been completed, but 17 squares had been circled in blue ink. Exactly 17. Bluebird. 17. My heart skipped. The text wasn't random. It was instructions. What am I looking at? She leaned closer. Read only the blue letters. I carefully wrote them down. One by one, the message slowly appeared. Not safe. Then another row. They know. A third. Find the key. I looked up. What key? Before she could answer, a car door slammed outside. Grandma's face lost all color. They're early. Who's early? She grabbed my wrist. the puzzle! What? Now. I shoved it inside my jacket just as footsteps echoed across the porch. Heavy footsteps. Confident footsteps. The front door opened without knocking. My father. Behind him, my mother. Mom froze when she saw me. Ethan? What are you doing here? I got Grandma's text. Dad answered before Mom could. What text? I pulled out my phone. Grandma's message was gone. Completely gone. I blinked. I knew I'd seen it. I hadn't imagined it. But the conversation had disappeared. Dad noticed my expression. You look stressed. He smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile someone gives when they're checking whether you figured something out. I swear she texted me. Mom laughed. Your grandmother barely knows how to text. Grandma stayed silent. She stared at the floor, almost as if speaking would make things worse. That frightened me more than anything. Dad walked toward the kitchen. We brought groceries. I watched him. He wasn't acting like a concerned son. He was acting like he owned the place. Opening cabinets. Checking drawers. Walking through rooms without saying a word. Almost. Like he was searching for something. I quietly followed him. What are you looking for? He shrugged. Medicine. In the silverware drawer? He slammed it shut. You ask too many questions. That sentence hit harder than it should have, because I'd heard it my entire childhood. Whenever I questioned unfair treatment, whenever I noticed favoritism, whenever I wanted answers, the response was always the same. You ask too many questions. For the first time in my life, I didn't back down. No. I think I've spent 26 years asking too few. Dad's expression hardened. For just a second, I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. It vanished almost instantly. But I caught it. Dinner that evening felt unbearable. Mom kept forcing cheerful conversation. Dad barely spoke. Grandma hardly touched her food. Every few minutes, she glanced toward the old grandfather clock in the hallway. Exactly at 8:17, the clock chimed. Once, twice, 3 times. Grandma quietly dropped her spoon. The sound made everyone look at her. Then she said something that seemed completely ordinary. Ethan, would you check on the Bluebirds tomorrow morning? Mom immediately interrupted. There aren't any bluebirds. Grandma looked directly into my eyes. Yes, there are. Something passed between us in that moment. She wasn't talking about birds. She was giving me another instruction. Later that night, I offered to stay. Mom insisted there was no need. Dad agreed a little too quickly. We've got everything under control. Grandma suddenly grabbed my hand. Her fingers shook. Stay. Just one word. But it carried more desperation than I'd ever heard. Dad looked annoyed. Ethan has work. I'll call in. Mom sighed dramatically. If that's what everyone wants. No. It wasn't what everyone wanted. It was what Grandma needed. And suddenly, that mattered more than anything else. Around midnight, I couldn't sleep. The farmhouse was unusually quiet. Then I heard something. A floorboard creaked downstairs. Not once, twice. Slow, careful footsteps. I looked at the clock. 12:43 a.m. I quietly opened my bedroom door. The hallway was dark. Another creak, coming from Grandpa's old study. The room nobody had entered in years. Em sighed dramatically. If that's what everyone wants. No, it wasn't what everyone wanted. It was what Grandma needed. And suddenly, that mattered more than anything else. Around midnight, I couldn't sleep. The farmhouse was unusually quiet. Then I heard something. A floorboard creaked downstairs. Not once. Twice. Slow, careful footsteps. I looked at the clock. 12:43 a.m. I quietly opened my bedroom door. The hallway was dark. Another creak, coming from Grandpa's old study. The room nobody had entered in years. I moved silently toward it. The door was slightly open. Inside, someone was shining a flashlight across the bookshelf. Searching. Not reading. Searching. I recognized the silhouette immediately. My father. He carefully removed several books, tapped the wooden shelves. Then suddenly, he muttered under his breath, "Damn it! Where did she hide it?" Hide what? Before I could think, a hand touched my shoulder. I nearly shouted. It was Grandma. She placed one trembling finger over her lips. "Don't let him see you." Then she leaned close enough that only I could hear. "The key isn't inside the house." My heart pounded. "What key?" She whispered just 4 words. "The Bluebird knows where." Then she gently closed the hallway door, leaving my father completely unaware that someone had been watching him. For the first time, I realized this wasn't about old family arguments. It wasn't about favoritism. It wasn't even about money. Whatever my parents were desperately searching for, they believed Grandma still had it. And somehow, she had chosen me. I didn't sleep for more than an hour. Grandma's whispered words kept echoing through my mind. The key isn't inside the house. The Bluebird knows where. Down the hall, I could still hear faint footsteps every now and then. My father was searching for something he clearly believed Grandma had hidden. The question was, what could possibly be important enough to make my own parents sneak around an 82-year-old woman's house in the middle of the night? At sunrise, I slipped out of bed before anyone else. The farmhouse was silent. I peeked into Grandma's room. She was asleep, or at least pretending to be. As I quietly closed the door, I noticed one of her hands resting on top of the blanket. 3 fingers were extended. Then she slowly folded one down. 2. She wasn't waving. She was counting. A signal. Without saying a word, she looked toward the backyard window. I nodded almost imperceptibly. She closed her eyes again. The backyard looked exactly as it had when I was a kid. The old vegetable garden, the rusted water pump, Grandpa's weathered tool shed, and just beyond the fence, a massive oak tree. Hanging from one of its lower branches was a faded wooden birdhouse, painted blue. I stopped walking. My pulse quickened. The Bluebird. As a child, Grandpa had built dozens of birdhouses, but only one had been painted bright blue. He used to joke that bluebirds always found their way home. Back then, I thought it was just another one of his stories. Now, I wasn't so sure. The birdhouse was almost 20 feet above the ground. I searched the shed until I found Grandpa's old extension ladder. The hinges squealed as I unfolded it. Every metallic click sounded loud enough to wake the whole neighborhood. Halfway up the ladder, I hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if this really was just an old birdhouse? But then I remembered the fear in Grandma's eyes. I climbed the rest of the way. Inside the birdhouse was an old nest. A few feathers. Some twigs. Nothing else. My heart sank. Then my fingers brushed against something taped beneath the roof. A tiny brass key, wrapped inside a plastic bag, along with a folded note. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. Grandpa's handwriting. There was no mistaking it. It read, "If Ethan found this, I was right." I froze.